Captain Elias Ward stepped down from the small shuttle, the air of the alien planet warm against his face. The sky above was a pale silver, filled with slow-moving clouds that glowed faintly in the light of two suns. In the distance, the capital, city of Thalira, shimmered like a dream, tall spires of crystal and stone twisting toward the heavens like frozen lightning. Elias adjusted his uniform and looked around. The landing platform was guarded by tall, elegant soldiers wearing armor that looked more ceremonial than practical. Their faces were calm, but their eyes followed his every step. He knew this was no ordinary diplomatic meeting. He had been called, here personally, by the ruler of the Thalirians, Queen Saravine herself, but no one would tell him why. A royal attendant, dressed in flowing robes of deep blue, bowed slightly. "Captain Ward," the attendant said in a clear, almost musical voice, "the Queen is expecting you. Please follow me." Elias kept his pace steady as they entered the palace gates. Inside, the corridors glowed with soft light, not from lamps, but from the walls themselves, as though the stone held its own gentle fire. Every step echoed faintly, and the air smelled faintly of something sweet, like blooming flowers after rain. He had met leaders before, presidents, generals, even planetary governors. But there was something about this meeting that felt different. It wasn't just the grandeur of the place, or the guards who stood silent as statues. It was the tension he felt deep in his gut, as if some part of him already knew this was going to change everything. The attendant led him to a tall set of doors carved with images of stars, moons, and oceans. With a graceful gesture, they opened. Elias stepped into the Queen's audience chamber. The room was vast, with a domed ceiling painted like the night sky. The floor was polished stone, cool under his boots, and streams of light fell through narrow crystal windows, catching on banners that hung from the walls. At the far end stood a throne made from a single piece of translucent crystal, carved so finely it seemed almost alive, and seated upon it was Queen Saravine. She was unlike any alien Elias had seen before. Her figure was tall and poised, her hair like strands of liquid silver, her eyes the deep green of ancient forests. Her skin had a faint natural glow, but it was subtle, as if it came from within rather than any decoration. She wore a crown that looked less like a symbol of power and more like an extension of herself. Delicate arcs of crystal and metal that caught the light. Elias stepped forward and bowed slightly, as protocol required. "Your Majesty," he said. "I'm honored to be here." For a moment, the Queen did not reply. Her gaze was fixed on him, sharp and searching, as if she were trying to see through every layer of who he was. Then, slowly, she rose from her throne. The chamber was silent, except for the sound of her footsteps as she crossed the room. Elias stood still, unsure what to expect. The guards by the walls watched, their faces unreadable. When she stopped in front of him, she did not speak. Instead, her eyes moved to his left shoulder. Without asking, she reached out a graceful hand. Her fingers brushed the fabric of his uniform, then rested lightly against the faint ridge beneath, the old scar he had carried for years. Elias felt his breath catch. Very few people ever noticed it. It was the mark left from a mission long ago, one he barely spoke about even to his closest friends. Yet here was an alien queen, touching it as if it were the most important thing in the universe. Her voice, when it came, was quiet, but filled with something Elias couldn't name. "So it was you?" she whispered. "After all these years?" Elias frowned slightly. "I'm not sure I understand." She withdrew her hand, but her eyes never left his. "I have waited a long time to meet you again, Captain Ward. Longer than you can imagine." Her words made no sense to him. Again? We've met before? The Queen's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile, though it was not a happy smile. Yes, once, long ago. But you did not know who I was then. And I did not know who you were. Not fully. Elias searched his memory, but nothing came. I don't recall ever. You saved my life, she interrupted softly. You bore that scar even then. It was the last thing I saw before you vanished. The air between them felt heavy. Elias opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. He remembered a rescue mission years ago, during the first fragile days of human contact with alien civilizations. A distress call, a stranded ship. But the details were hazy, almost dreamlike, as if time itself had blurred them. Before he could gather his thoughts, the Queen turned away and walked toward the tall windows, gazing out at the city below. The threads of fate are strange, she said. You came to me once in my time of need, and now you are here again when the shadows return. Shadows? Elias asked, stepping forward. She looked back at him, her expression serious. There are dangers you do not yet see, Captain Ward, but you will. And when you do, you will understand why I called you here. Elias felt that strange tension in his gut again. Whatever was happening, this was no ordinary diplomatic visit. This was personal. The Queen knew something about his past, his scar, and a connection between them he couldn't yet grasp. Your Majesty, he said carefully, if there's something you need me to do, I'll hear it, but you have to tell me what's going on. She gave him a long, unreadable look. Then, with a faint nod, she said, all in time. For now you must remember. Remember the desert moon. Remember the fire and the wound. Only then will the truth be clear. Elias stood in silence as the Queen turned back to the window. Outside, the silver sky seemed to darken slightly, though the sun still shone. He didn't know it yet, but this was the moment his life, and perhaps the fate of two worlds, began to change forever. The next morning, the palace felt different. The corridors were still bright and beautiful, but Elias noticed more guards than before. They stood at every turn, silent and watchful, their eyes scanning for danger that wasn't yet visible. An attendant arrived at his guest chamber and bowed politely. Her Majesty requests your presence in the Garden of Mirrors, the attendant said. Elias followed without question. They walked through winding hallways until they reached a large open courtyard. The air here was cooler, filled with the sound of running water. Hundreds of tall glass-like panels stood in neat rows, catching the sunlight and scattering it into thousands of colors. Between the panels grew strange alien plants, silver leaves, flowers that glowed faintly blue, and vines that curled as if they could feel the warmth of a hand. Queen Saravine was waiting beside a shallow pool. She wore a simple robe of white silk, without her crown, and for the first time Elias saw her not as a distant ruler, but as a person. Captain Ward, she said, gesturing for him to sit on a low bench beside her. I promised I would explain. Elias sat, keeping his voice calm. Yesterday you said we had met before. I still don't remember. That is because you were not meant to, she replied softly. Your people were new to the stars then. My people were cautious. The first contact was not friendly. There was fear on both sides. Elias nodded slowly. He had read about those years, the misunderstandings, the tense negotiations, the small battles that almost turned into war. She looked down at the pool, watching the water ripple. I was not always a queen. I was a young soldier, a scout in the border systems. One day my ship was attacked by raiders. My crew was killed. I barely escaped in a small craft, but it was damaged. I crashed on a barren moon. nothing but sand and rock. Her voice grew quieter. I was injured, and the air was thin. I thought I would die there. But then, someone came. Elias felt a strange pull in his memory, like a door he had never opened. You were wearing armor, she continued. Human armor. I had never seen one of your kind before. You fought the raiders who were still searching for me. I remember the way. You moved, quick, determined, like the desert heat could not touch you. You dragged me to shelter and treated my wounds. Elias felt a faint memory surface. Heat, sand, a strange sky. The sound of blaster fire in the distance. A figure lying half buried in the sand, eyes barely open. And yes, a faint green glow in those eyes. You carried me for hours, she said. You refused to stop, even when the wind cut your face and your shoulder bled from a deep burn. That burn left a scar, the one you still have. Elias touched his shoulder unconsciously. That mission, I thought it was just a rescue of a lost civilian. We weren't told who you were. She gave a small smile. And I was too weak to tell you. You left me with my people, then disappeared. When I asked about the human soldier with the scar, they said there was no record. Perhaps your leaders thought it safer to hide such a meeting. That sounds like them, Elias admitted. Humans weren't ready for real trust back then. Her smile faded. I became queen years later, but I never forgot the one who saved me. I did not think I would ever see you again. And then, yesterday you stood before me. Elias was silent for a moment, letting the truth sink in. Why now? Why bring me here? Her eyes hardened, the softness replaced with the strength of a ruler. Because the same ones who tried to kill me that day are moving again. We call them the Veilborn. They work in the shadows, stealing, sabotaging, and whispering lies to turn our worlds against each other. I've heard rumors, Elias said, but nothing confirmed. They will not show themselves until it is almost too late, she said. They fear one thing, the prophecy. Elias raised an eyebrow. Prophecy? Her voice lowered. It is old, older than our cities. It says, the one marked by the fire wound will return in the time of greatest shadow, and the twin worlds will stand or fall by their choice. Elias gave a short laugh, but there was no humor in it. You're saying my scar is part of some ancient story? I am saying it is more than a scar, she replied firmly. It is a sign. The Veilborn knew this. That is why they tried to kill you before. That is why they will try again. Elias leaned back, looking at the mirrored panels around them. His reflection stared back from a dozen angles. So, you think I'm supposed to stop them? I think, Scifi said, that fate has given you a second chance to finish what you started. They sat in silence for a moment. The only sound was the trickle of water in the pool. Finally, Elias asked, What do you want me to do? She stood, her white robe flowing in the breeze. First, you must see what you are up against. There is a place in the crystal deserts, an ancient temple. The prophecy is carved there, and perhaps other truths you need to know. Elias rose to his feet. Then let's go. Her expression softened. You do not fear this path? I've spent most of my life walking into trouble, he said with a half smile. Might as well keep the tradition. For the first time, the queen laughed, a sound like chimes in the wind. But her laughter faded quickly. Be ready, Captain Ward. The shadows are already moving. From the far end of the garden, a guard approached at a quick pace and bowed deeply. Your Majesty, he said, his voice tense. A message from the border outposts. Unidentified ships have been sighted, moving toward our space. Seravine's eyes met Elias's. It begins. The journey to the crystal deserts began before dawn. The twin suns had not yet risen, and the sky was painted in deep blue and violet. Captain Elias Ward stood on the palace landing platform, watching as a sleek silver transport ship hummed to life. Queen Scifi stepped aboard first, followed by two of her most trusted guards. Elias carried only a small pack, enough supplies for a few days. The queen had told him the desert temple was far from any settlement and rarely visited. If the Veilborn truly feared the prophecy, then it made sense that the place had been left untouched for centuries. As the ship lifted off, the capital city fell away beneath them, its crystal spires glowing faintly in the first light. Elias kept his eyes on the horizon. He didn't like being kept in the dark, and the queen had still told him only fragments of what was going on. But he had learned long ago that patience could be a weapon. Sometimes you waited, and the truth revealed itself when the moment was right. Hours later, the silver towers of the city were gone, replaced by endless dunes that shimmered like glass under the rising suns. The wind blew fine dust across the surface, creating long trails that looked almost alive. "This place looks empty," Elias said, scanning the view. "It is empty now," Scifi replied. "But long ago the deserts were full of life. My ancestors built the temple at the center of the sands. Some say it was the first building ever raised on Thalira." Elias leaned back in his seat. "And the prophecy is carved there," she nodded. "Every word, and more that I have never spoken to anyone." That caught his attention. "Why me?" Her green eyes met his. "Because you are the one it speaks of, and because I trust you." He didn't know if trust was the right word. They barely knew each other, but there was something in her tone, a certainty, that made him believe she meant it. They landed on a flat stretch of pale stone at the edge of a canyon. The heat outside hit Elias like a wall. He pulled his scarf higher over his mouth and nose, but fine grains of crystal dust still slipped past. The canyon stretched out before them, its sides glittering in the sunlight as if cut from diamond. The temple appeared slowly as they walked, first as a dark shape in the distance, then as a towering structure carved directly into the canyon wall. It had no doors, only a wide archway that led into shadow. Strange symbols were etched into the stone around the entrance, worn smooth by centuries of wind. Inside, the air was cooler. Shafts of sunlight pierced the roof, lighting patches of the floor. The walls were covered in carvings, battles, stars, strange machines. Elias ran his hand over one, feeling the shallow grooves beneath his fingers. "These tell the story of our early days," Scifi said. "When the Thalirians were young, before we reached the stars. We believed the sky was a place of gods and monsters." Elias's eyes stopped on a carving of a lone figure standing between two armies, one alien, one human. Above the figure was a spiral mark, the same shape as the scar on his shoulder. He froze. "That's—" He turned to her. "Yes," she said quietly. "The fire wound." Elias stepped back, staring at the wall. "This can't be real. I'm not some chosen hero from an alien story." Her expression was calm, but her voice was firm. "It is not about being chosen, Captain Ward. It is about what you have already done, and what you will choose to do next." They moved deeper into the temple, the air growing cooler and the light dimmer. Finally, they entered a wide chamber with a single raised platform. On the walls around it were long lines of writing, flowing and curved. Scifi approached the platform, placing her hand on its surface. "This is the heart of the prophecy," she said. "It speaks of a shadow that hides in plain sight, a force that lives between worlds, feeding on mistrust and fear. It says the shadow will grow until only the world bridger can stand against it." Elias studied the writing. "And You think the Veilborn are that shadow? I do not think, she said. I know. They have been moving for decades, stealing our technology, sabotaging human colonies, spreading lies so that when war begins, it will seem inevitable. Elias felt a knot form in his stomach. And you believe I'm supposed to stop them? I believe you are the only one who can bring humans and Thalirians together long enough to stop them, she replied. That is what World Bridger means. Before Elias could respond, a faint sound echoed through the chamber, the crunch of a boot on stone. Both of them turned sharply. The guards at the entrance had their weapons raised. From the shadows beyond the doorway, several figures stepped forward. They wore dark armor that seemed to absorb light, their faces hidden behind smooth black masks. Elias didn't need to be told who they were. Veilborn, Saravine said, her voice cold. The leader stepped closer, his voice muffled by the mask. We warned you, Queen Saravine. The human does not belong here. Elias took a slow step forward. Funny. I was just starting to feel welcome. The masked figure tilted his head. You should have stayed in your own world, Captain Ward. This one is not yours to save. Elias's hand moved to his sidearm, but Saravine's voice stopped him. Not here, she said quietly. The temple is sacred. The Veilborn leader gave a low, humorless laugh. Sacred or not, it will burn, and the prophecy will burn with it. Before Elias could move, the Veilborn threw something small and round to the floor. A blinding flash filled the chamber, and when Elias's vision cleared, the attackers were gone, leaving only the faint smell of burned metal. Saravine's guards rushed in, scanning the area. Elias looked at her. They know I'm here. That means they'll come after me. Her gaze was steady. Yes, and that means we have little time. The transport ship cut through the desert sky on its way back to the capital. Inside, the mood was tense. Captain Elias Ward sat across from Queen Saravine, the soft hum of the engines the only sound between them for a long time. The Veilborns' sudden appearance at the temple had changed everything. They weren't there by chance, Elias said finally. They knew exactly where we would be. Saravine's eyes narrowed slightly, which means someone inside the palace is feeding them information. An informant, Elias said. A traitor. Yes, she replied, and one clever enough to stay hidden for years. Elias leaned back, crossing his arms. If the Veilborn wanted me gone, they could have tried at the temple, but they didn't. Why? Saravine's gaze held his. Because they want you afraid. They want you to doubt yourself before the real fight begins. Elias gave a short, humorless laugh. Then they don't know me very well. By the time they returned to the capital, the palace was already on high alert. Patrols of guards moved through the corridors, and several chambers had been sealed off. Saravine led Elias to a part of the palace he hadn't seen before, a narrow stairway that spiraled deep below the main halls. Where are we going? He asked. To the archive vault, she said. It holds records so old even most of my advisors have never seen them. If we are to understand the prophecy fully, we must start here. The air grew cooler as they descended. At the bottom, two guards in heavy ceremonial armor stood before a massive door of dark metal. Symbols glowed faintly across its surface. Saravine placed her hand against a small panel, and the symbols shifted, unlocking the door with a deep, resonant tone. Inside, the vault was lit by soft white light. Rows of tall shelves stretched out in every direction, filled with crystal tablets, ancient scrolls, and strange devices that looked half mechanical, half organic. Elias followed Saravine down the central aisle until they reached a circular table. She pulled a small crystal from her robe and placed it in a slot at the table's center. Immediately, a holographic projection flickered to life above it. An image of the temple carvings they had just seen, more vivid and detailed than Elias remembered. This, she said, pointing to the spiral mark, is the symbol of the fire wound. It appears in our history many times, always connected to a figure who comes from another world. Elias studied the projection. So I'm not the first? You are the first in many generations, she replied. The last recorded appearance was over 400 years ago. That one united 3 warring nations on my world. But once the danger passed, he vanished. Elias frowned. Vanished? No one knows where he went, Scifi said. Some believe he returned to his own world. Others say the Veilborn killed him to stop the prophecy from repeating. Elias let out a slow breath. Not exactly a comforting thought. Scifi gave a faint smile. The fact that you stand here now means they failed before, and I do not intend to let them succeed this time. For the next hour, they studied. More records. Some were written in the flowing script of Old Thalirian, others in symbols Elias couldn't recognize at all. One set of tablets caught his eye. They showed maps of both Thalirian and human territories, with glowing lines connecting certain points. What are these? Elias asked. Trade routes, communication relays, and military outposts, Scifi said. Places that, if disrupted, would weaken both our worlds. Elias traced the lines with his finger. And I'm guessing these are the places the Veilborn have been targeting. Yes, she said, quietly so that neither side sees. The full pattern. But if you connect the incidents, you see the shape of their plan. They're not trying to win a battle, Elias said. They're trying to make a war happen on its own. Scifi nodded. Fear and mistrust will do their work for them. A sudden chime echoed through the vault. One of the guards at the door spoke into a small communicator, then turned sharply toward the Queen. Your Majesty, there has been an incident in the Eastern District. An explosion at a communications hub. Scifi's jaw tightened. Casualties? Unknown, the guard replied. But the human trade delegation was nearby. Elias didn't need to hear more. The Veilborn, he said. They're moving faster now. Yes, Scifi agreed. And they are striking in places where humans will be blamed. That's going to destroy the peace talks, Elias said grimly. If they succeed, neither side will trust the other enough to work together. Which is exactly what they want, Scifi said. She turned to him. We must move before the summit begins. If we can uncover their base of operations, we can end this before open conflict starts. Elias straightened. Then we start looking tonight. They left the vault and returned to the upper levels of the palace. Outside, the suns were setting, turning the crystal towers of the city gold and crimson. The sight would have been beautiful, if not for the faint haze of smoke rising from the eastern horizon. As they walked toward the strategy chamber, Scifi spoke in a quieter voice. Elias, there is something else I have not told you. He glanced at her. I'm starting to get used to that. This prophecy, she said. It does not say the World Bridger will succeed, only that they will choose, and that choice will decide the fate of both worlds. Elias looked ahead, his face unreadable. So, no pressure then. Her lips curved into a faint smile. I believe you will choose well. When they reached the strategy chamber, a large holomap displayed the city and surrounding territories. Red markers pulsed where recent incidents had occurred. Sabotage at power plants, stolen supply shipments, now the explosion at the communications hub. Elias studied the pattern carefully. They're circling the capital, he said. Cutting off resources, communications, and trust all at the same time. Exactly, Scifi said. If we cannot break the circle, the summit will be nothing but an empty ceremony. Elias tapped one of the red markers. If I were them, I'd need a command center close enough to monitor everything, but far enough to avoid detection. Somewhere in the outer districts, Saravine's eyes brightened. There are old tunnels beneath the industrial zone, abandoned decades ago. Few go there now. Elias gave a small, determined nod. Then that's where we start. As the last light of the suns faded from the windows, Elias felt the familiar weight of an approaching fight. The Veilborn had shown themselves once already. Next time, he planned to be ready. The great silver gates of the alien capital opened with a deep rumble. Ethan and Queen Serenia stepped inside together, walking side by side. The air was cool and carried a faint floral scent. Towers of glass and metal stretched into the clouds, reflecting the pale blue light of the alien sun. Everywhere they walked, people stopped to look. Alien guards bowed to their queen, their eyes flickering to Ethan with curiosity. Whispers followed them. Some were confused. Others seemed uneasy. It was clear the queen had told no one about his connection to the scar and the past. Serenia led him through a wide avenue lined with glowing trees. "This is the heart of my world," she said softly, "but it is also where the truth has been. Hidden for years." Ethan looked up at the towers. "What truth?" he asked. She gave a faint smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. "The day you got your scar, Ethan. It wasn't an accident, and it wasn't random fate." They reached a tall building, its doors opening without a sound. Inside was a circular hall filled with floating screens and old artifacts. In the center stood a pedestal on which rested a crystalline sphere. It pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. Serenia approached it. "This," she said, "is the memory core. It holds the record of the first meeting between your kind and mine. Only a queen can unlock it." Ethan felt his pulse quicken. "So you're saying my scar is part of that?" Without answering, Serenia placed her hands on the sphere. Light burst from it, spreading across the room like water. Shapes formed in the air, moving images, as if the past had returned. Ethan saw a younger version of himself, only 15, running through a burning alien city. His arms were scratched, his shirt torn. Behind him, alien soldiers were evacuating civilians. Then the image showed an alien girl, wounded and trapped under debris. "That's you," Serenia whispered, her voice trembling. The boy in the vision knelt beside her, trying to lift the rubble. A sharp explosion knocked him to the ground. A jagged shard slicing across his shoulder. He cried out in pain, but still pushed the debris away and helped the girl up. She was small, frightened, and had golden eyes, the same eyes Serenia had now. Ethan's breath caught. "That was you?" "Yes," she said. "I was the princess then. My guards were far away. You saved me, and then you disappeared. We searched for years, but Earth was far, and my people feared contact after the war. Still, I remembered your face. I remembered the scar you took that day." The light faded, and the room returned to silence. Ethan felt like the floor had vanished beneath him. All these years he'd thought his scar was just a mark from a chaotic event during an alien raid. He had never imagined it was tied to saving a future queen's life. "You've been carrying a piece of our history on your skin," Serenia said softly. "And I have been carrying the memory in my heart." For a moment, Ethan didn't know what to say. The world outside seemed far away. Only the truth between them mattered now. Finally, he asked, "Why tell me now?" Serenia turned toward one of the tall windows. Beyond it, alien ships drifted in the sky. "Because the past is coming back," she said. "The same enemy that attacked my city years ago is moving again. They have found Earth, and I cannot protect both worlds without you." Ethan's stomach tightened. "You think I can help stop them? I'm no soldier anymore." She looked at him with a quiet determination. "You're human. That is more than enough." He almost laughed at the strange statement, but there was no joke in her eyes. They left the memory core and walked toward the royal strategy chamber. Inside, a vast star map hovered in the air, showing glowing points for planets and flashing red for threats. At the edge of the map, Earth blinked softly, while another point far away pulsed with an ominous light. "That's them," Serenia said, pointing to the red flare. "We call them the Harrow. They don't conquer for resources, they destroy, simply to erase life." Ethan frowned. "Then why didn't they finish Earth back then?" "Because you stopped them from taking me," Serenia answered. "They wanted me as a hostage. Without me, their plans failed and they retreated to rebuild, but they never forget. And now, they are ready again." The room fell into a tense silence. Outside, alien ships passed by, their hulls glinting in the sunlight. Ethan finally said, "If they're coming, we need a plan, a real one, not just defense." Serenia nodded slowly. "You think like a human commander." "I think like someone who's seen what they can do," Ethan replied. The Queen's advisors soon joined them, tall figures with silver robes and long, delicate fingers. They studied Ethan with wary glances, but Serenia introduced him without hesitation. "This is the human who saved me long ago. He will stand with me against the Harrow." Some of them objected immediately. "A human? From a distant, underdeveloped world?" one elder asked sharply. "He is more than that," Serenia said firmly. "He is proof that courage is not bound by species." Ethan didn't speak, but he felt the weight of their stares. Over the next hours, they began planning. Maps were drawn, ship routes calculated, and possible alliances discussed. The Harrow's strength was great, but Serenia believed that together, humans and her people, they might stand a chance. As the meeting ended, Serenia turned to Ethan. "We have little time," she said, "and before the battle begins, there is one more thing you must know." Her voice lowered to a whisper. "The Harrow are not just my enemy. They are tied to your world's past in ways even your people do not remember." Ethan stared at her, a mix of shock and curiosity tightening his chest. "Then I guess the scar wasn't the only thing they left behind." She held his gaze. "No, Ethan. They left something far worse." The quiet hum of the spaceport was a stark contrast to the storm raging inside Captain Elias Ward's mind. He stood beside Queen Scifi on the observation deck, watching the massive fleet gather beneath the alien sky. Ships of every shape and size, their hulls gleaming under twin suns, waited silently for the battle to begin. Elias's scar itched, a familiar, almost painful reminder of the past and the promise he had made without fully understanding it. He looked at the Queen, whose calm green eyes betrayed the weight of the coming fight. "The Veil-born won't wait," Scifi said softly. "They want to break us before we even lift off." Elias clenched his fists. "Then let's show them what humans can do." The Peace Summit was supposed to be a symbol of unity, humans and Thalirians standing side by side to forge a lasting bond. Instead, it became the battlefield. Explosions rocked the capital, shattering crystal towers and sending shards raining like deadly rain. The Veilborn struck hard and fast, their masked warriors moving through shadows, attacking communication hubs and power stations. Panic surged through the crowd. Elias and Scifi moved swiftly, coordinating defenses and leading their forces. His human training meshed with her alien tactics, creating a strategy that surprised their attackers. "Hold the line here," Elias shouted over the chaos. "We can't let them divide us now." The soldiers, both human and Thalirian, rallied around his words. Their determination grew stronger, fueled by the bond between the two leaders. Amid the battle, Elias found himself face to face with the Veil-born leader, a towering figure clad in dark armor that seemed to swallow the light. "You should have stayed hidden, human," the leader hissed, voice distorted by a mask. Elias stood firm. "I'm not hiding. I'm fighting. The Veilborn attacked with a blade crackling with energy, but Elias dodged quickly, using moves he had learned years ago in Earth's special forces. He found an opening and struck back, his sidearm firing precise shots. The fight was fierce, but Elias's resilience shone through. Every wound he took, every scar he bore, reminded him why he could not fail. Meanwhile, Queen Saravine rallied her people. With a commanding voice, she led a charge that pushed back the Veilborn's forces from the city center. Her hands glowed faintly with ancient energy, a gift of her lineage, as she shattered barriers and healed the wounded. Her presence was a beacon of hope, inspiring both her soldiers and the human allies. The battle reached its climax near the palace gates. Elias and the Veilborn leader clashed again, this time with raw strength and willpower. "Your scar marks you as the World Bridger," the leader snarled. "You carry the fate of two worlds, but that fate ends here." Elias gritted his teeth. "The scar saved more than you know." With a final surge, Elias disarmed the leader and forced him to the ground. "It's over," Elias said, breathing heavily. As the dust settled, the Veilborn retreated, their plan shattered. The survivors began to rebuild, and the summit resumed, stronger than before. Queen Saravine stood beside Elias before the crowd, her voice clear and proud. "This man," she said, touching his scar gently, "is the one who saved not only my life once, but also the future of our two worlds. The scar that marked him is the scar that saved us all." Cheers rose from both humans and Thalarians alike. Later, as the suns set over the peaceful city, Elias stood on the balcony of the palace, looking out over the horizon. Saravine joined him quietly. "You did what many said was impossible," she said. Elias smiled softly. "Maybe we're all stronger when we stand together." She nodded, her eyes shining with hope. The scar on his shoulder throbbed once more, not from pain, but from promise. A promise that the bond between Earth and Thalira would never be broken again.